Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. David Kodeski.
It's called Mr. Forgione and the Barefoot Hippie. One day, one summer, when I was in the backyard and I was probably with Linda Chinchetti and we were probably doing something we were not supposed to be doing, and I was maybe 9 or 11 or something, and Mr. Forgione came to my house wielding a 2x4. There may have been a nail, crooked, rusted, and bent in this 2x4, but I may have added this detail later. Mr. Forgione appeared quite suddenly. In my memory, he emerged from the field of tall grasses and tugging brambles that filled the empty lot next door. But it is more likely that he stalked up the crushed gravel path that ran alongside the garage, and maybe the 2x4 was more of a stick. Still, it was some kind of a length of lumber, and whenever somebody wields some kind of a length of lumber in your general direction, the possibility that you will remember it is very likely. It is equally likely that the shock of the moment and the passage of time will cause you to confuse or conflate some of the more specific details, such as a 10-penny nail rusted and bent. In this particular case, a great deal of time has gone by, and some of that time includes the confounding and fun-filled years of puberty, which are certain and inevitable years of confusion and conflation, and I've been trying to recall the specifics of what would make a grown man so angry that he would wield the length of lumber upon 2 children, bad as they might have been. One might question why a man might go, as they say, postal. Mr. Forgione appeared quite suddenly, and he was enraged, and he held the length of lumber as if to strike, and with spittle flying from his lips, he warned me, and he warned Linda, to stop picking on his daughters, or else. Or else. Mr. Forgione wore a blue uniform every day and worked for the U.S. Postal Service. Mr. Forgione delivered the mail. In a room off the playroom in the Forgione's house, there were circulars and samples and coupons and the sort of mail that goes directly into the garbage can in many, many houses. I would peek into this room whenever I went to the basement of the Forgione house to spend time in the Forgione girls' playroom, judging by the stacks of these circulars, samples, and coupons. It is fairly obvious that Mr. Forgione didn't always deliver all of the mail, all of the time. There were 3 Forgione girls, and Mr. Forgione was a divorcee, an exoticism in this neighborhood of Catholics who are still getting used to the notion of Vatican II. And because they were from a broken home, the Forgione girls always had babysitters and, enviously, frozen TV dinners for lunch. In addition to those TV dinners, they had all the best toys. Not just girl toys, but boy toys, and toys for boys and girls, and games for children of all ages. The Forgione girls had one babysitter whose name was Darlene, and who was a true hippie. She dropped acid once and walked down the snow-covered street without a coat or a hat or gloves or even shoes. And as she passed down the snowy street, all the neighbors stood at their picture windows, shook their heads, and wondered aloud what had become of their world. Many years later, I would run into this babysitter who was a hippie and who served up TV dinners for lunch, whether on acid or not. And I would see her after the confounding and fun-filled years of puberty had passed, and as the possibilities of adult life stretched before me. I would see her when she was older too, now with 2 children and married to a man who looked clean cut and normal and who was maybe never a hippie who walked barefoot through the snow. I would see her at Fantasy Island, a small local amusement park that had its name before the TV show. She did not know me when she saw me as an adult, but I knew her. And I could see she tried to remember knowing me, but at last could not. And then she and her clean-cut husband and 2 children rode away in their little cart on the Wild Mouse roller coaster, and I never saw her again. At Fantasy Island, I worked 9 hours a day, 6 days a week for one lazy, hot summer in a bear costume in the outdoors. My parents were pleased because I was putting my theater arts degree from Niagara County Community College to good use. To their credit, they never stood in the way of my dropping my major in television and radio production for a degree in theater arts. But they worried, as parents do, that I wouldn't get my chance to make my living in my chosen career. So, I worked 9 hours a day, 6 days a week for one lazy hot summer as a costume character at Fantasy Island, and my future, golden and filled with promise, stretched before me. At Fantasy Island, for one lazy hot summer, I performed in a country bear jamboree, which starred Goldilocks and 3 irascible bears. I played Blooper, the drumming baby bear, and the company that had hired us had not seen fit to supply Blooper, the drumming bear, with drums or drumsticks. And so, in my show must go on mentality, I used 2 lengths of lumber, 2 spokes from an old wagon wheel, scavenged from the Western Town Shootout show, and I banged somewhat rhythmically on an overturned rain barrel. At first, the experience was quite fun. I was in show business. And like any bad situation, there were the mitigating factors of ridiculousness. The ill-fitting and ill-constructed bear costumes, the terrible quality of the script, and the absurdity of performing the show at all. Considering it was to a click track that clacked more than it clicked, it was decidedly worn out and warped sounding. Our contract stipulated that we were to perform the entire 15-minute show 3 times daily, whether there was an audience present or not. Not many parents would bring their children to see Goldilocks Hillbilly Bear Jamboree, and if they did, they sat only for a few minutes on the splintery benches in the blazing hot concrete seating area for a few sullen minutes, and then moved on. As the track clicked, the basic gist of the plot was that the bears would argue amongst themselves, and Goldilocks would try to get them to put aside their bickering in the name of show business. Goldilocks would scold and cajole and attempt to sing as we 3 bears argued, and as we argued, we'd flail our arms and wag our heads in an endeavor to get Goldilocks between us. We would rough her up. We were not gentle bears, and became less and less gentle as the summer progressed. We were not gentle bears mostly because the woman who lip-synced Goldilocks was a stick-in-the-mud pain in the ass. She was majoring in television radio journalism, and when I see those boxes of hair that are news anchors today, I can see that she would very easily have gone on to become a TV news anchor in a very small market. smaller than the Quad Cities small. Goldilocks very much disapproved of what she called our very unprofessional behavior, which was not limited to our roughing her up during the shows, but included our general attitudes and our off-stage activity. Between shows, our time was spent mostly in a dressing room behind the Goldilocks Country Bear Jamboree stage, a screenless shack that had the mosquito benefit of hanging over the lagoon, a glorified ditch in the center of the park. To battle the heat and humidity and to remain hydrated on those hot summer days, we three bears drank gallons of Gatorade and ate frozen juice bars. At some point during the day, we would smoke pot, or read, or talk, or sleep. Goldilocks would sit separately from us, scowling as she highlighted her copy of Fundamentals of Television and Broadcast Journalism. Goldilocks could not see through to the fact that the pot smoking and the roughhousing aside, in this instance it was essentially impossible to behave unprofessionally. Other than the day of our hire, we never spoke to our employers once. Our checks came every other week from a P.O. box in Phoenix, Arizona. Our costumes were never cleaned or repaired from Memorial Day to Labor Day. And by midsummer, the costumes with their oversized heads, hands, and feet weighed heavily and reeked mightily when the midday sun beat down. Crusty with sun-dried sweat, reeking with mildew, we would spray down the fake fur with an off-brand disinfectant that had an aqua line drawing of a nurse silk-screened on the label, which did not neutralize the odor, but instead mingled with it to create an odor that could best be described as substandard managed care facility. Requests for clean costumes or replacement click-track tapes that were not worn out were promised, but never delivered. The remainder of the summer passed slowly. The days grew hotter and more humid. We became grumpy, mistrustful, paranoid bears. We three Jamboree bears continued to torment Goldilocks 3 times daily, but our spirit was no longer in it. We spent increasing time between shows dozing in separate corners. By the end of the season, all conversation between us had ceased. It was as if some sort of strange reverse season hibernation had descended upon us. After Labor Day, the telephones of our employers in Arizona were disconnected. We were never paid for our final month of work. Didn't matter to me, really. I was more than happy to put the summer behind me. I stepped toward the future, and I never saw Papa Bear, Mama Bear, or Goldilocks ever again. Not even on the evening news.
David Kodeski, everybody.